It is July 18th, 2025, and I remain Frank Vaughn, and I'm going to give you the most comprehensive Epstein video that I've done so far in terms of clarifying my position. But first, breaking news out of the CBC. They have launched a full-scale investigation into Mark Carney's business ties and conflict of interest, as well as examining his ties to Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm just with you. Fascist fight clubs are training for a race war in parks and gyms. CBC tracked them. Some of Canada's most notorious white supremacists are preparing for violence. Active clubs are all over Canada. What are they? Canada's military should fix white supremacy problem before it starts, says analyst, before it starts. And our multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-gay rainbow sidewalk, lift your feet when you drive across it, military, before it starts the white supremacy problem. I just want to note before I get into this, the Popular Now sidebar, in spite of this being the front page in them, you're going to see how much resource they dedicated to this story. It's not trending at all. Nobody cares. Before we get to the actual coverage, I just want you to note there's a correlation, a positive correlation. If they do articles about white supremacy, they will always put a picture of Pierre Poilievre, even though it's an unrelated story. It'll be on the front page at the same time because they want you to know that he's the face of white supremacy, which is another absurd allegation. But you got to check this out. We'll scroll all the way back up to the top because I went through this. Look at the energy that your tax dollars went into this investigation. There's 187 active clubs in 27 countries because they couldn't stir up enough anger at Jeremy Mackenzie's second sons and the Ferryman's Toll and their clubs. Now, I don't want to get into those guys. They hate me. I know they don't like me very much at all. Jeremy Mackenzie's always had lots of things to say about me. I've restricted how much I respond to it because it's just frankly not important to my life. You know, it's interesting. Ezra Levent called Jeremy Mackenzie a Fed. And Jeremy Mackenzie didn't sue him. And there's been all kinds of libelous allegations that would be libelous, that would be slanderous, and could equal an easy payday leveled against some of these characters, and they've never sued, which I find interesting. But just keep in mind, I'm the number 2, at least according to some of Jeremy Mackenzie's live streams. I've been sent screenshots that I'm the number 2 shill influencer or person who's, I can't even remember how he worded it. It was something like, I keep the CPC weak, whatever. I don't even care. The point is, this isn't covering Khalistani separatists. This isn't covering Hamas and Hezbollah infiltration into Canada. This isn't covering money laundering. This isn't covering triads. This isn't covering the mass scale. CBC's never told you that 84%, and I'm stuck. I stick to that figure because Australia's on the other side of the world. 84% of Australian methamphetamine comes right from Canada. This isn't an in-depth investigation about the 4,000 plus criminal organizations that we have in Canada. This isn't talking about the gun trade along the Trans-Canada Highway that's run by Eritreans and other people of African origin. We're not talking about Sikh extremism. We're not talking about Chinese triads using our ports and importing. No, but CBC has all kinds of your money to out these individuals, which the various clubs tried to keep their identity secret, but they have nothing but time to destroy. We're talking a few hundred people here. We're not talking about tens of thousands of people, which the movement for a Khalistani republic is literally in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands by now. We're talking about a few hundred people spread out all over the country. And they got all kinds of time to ID them and tell you about it and write this huge article and identify where they are and just resources unending. They don't have time to talk about Carney and his business ties and his conflicts of interest and actually build details like this, like actually build a case about this guy in this kind of depth. They don't have time to look into the fact that Carney and his wife are barbecuing and hanging out at a park with Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in jail. What's she in jail for? Child sex trafficking. They don't have time to cross the T's and dot the I's and get into any detail. But this, it just on and on it goes. They had all kinds of time for this. This is Canada in a nutshell. Not important news, politics. CBC is about an ideology. It's about a political narrative. It's about the Liberal Party of Canada, and they receive $1.2 billion of your taxpayer dollars so that they can produce this nonsense. So once again, news out of Canada has absolutely nothing relevant to say today. It's a snooze fest that's incredibly aggravating at the exact same time. False, malicious, defamatory. Trump demands unsealing of Epstein files, threatens lawsuit after WSJ hit piece. Here's the hit piece. Jeffrey Epstein's friend sent him body letters for a 50th birthday party album. One was from Donald Trump. I want you to know that I don't believe this for a second. I think what is most likely happening here, at least, see, this is one of those instances where the truth is kind of sprinkled all around. The best lie has a core of truth built into it. I think that when Donald Trump says and dismisses the entire thing as fake news and a conspiracy of the Democrats, and he attacks, he's trying to make it go away because fake news has been inserted into this story, and he smelled a propaganda coup coming his way, because all you got to do is go through the left-wing influencers, and this is big news on the left, that Donald Trump is covering up his own pedophilia, his own use of Epstein's services. I don't think that happened. This is a man who kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago in 2004 and distanced himself and cooperated initially with investigators who were trying to get to the bottom of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. The cover-up, the original cover-up of Jeffrey Epstein does not come from Donald Trump. It comes from the entire political and financial class. It's bipartisan, which is why I say the client list is not the right talking point. The real talking point should be, where did Jeffrey Epstein come from? How did he become so powerful? And how did he manage to stay out of jail? Or when he went to jail, had half the jail to himself, had a deal with the judge where he had half the jail. This is back in the Audis. Half the jail to himself. He was able to bring in his own private security that he paid for out of his pocket and basically ran the place for some of the more heinous crimes that you can commit. This is a man, as you're going to see, who got fired. Actually, we'll get into that. First, let's just finish with this. I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think this is about Donald Trump covering up his tracks. I think there's been fake information inserted into these documents that he is concerned about, and rather than parsing it and rather than facing the battle, he is trying to make it go away. But instead what he has done, and if you're on the fence, if you're one of these people who thinks it's 5D chess and the truth's about to come out and all this stuff, and this was Trump's plan all along, he went too far by calling MAGA weak and throwing them under the bus and calling them his past supporters because they dared want the thing that he promised them that they would get. Maybe he wanted to get them right riled up and angry, but why? If the public needed to be angry and he needed to get people to call for this list, or not even the list, for the investigations to continue and the grand jury testimony to be released, and the total truth about Epstein, which is actually self-evident and has been for a long time, if that was his goal, why did they do the public spectacle of holding up the Epstein files and calling it phase 1? Why did they do that whole thing? Where's phase 2? Now they're saying there's nothing to see. And calling people who think there is something to see, people who can think, weaklings and idiots and everything else like he's doing, I don't see it as necessary. So just to put a bow on this, I think the client list is the wrong talking point. I think people should be far more concerned about what Jeffrey did and who he was working for and on whose behalf he was doing it. I also think that Trump hiding his own pedoism is the wrong talking point as well. If Trump is covering something up, it's the deep level of the intelligence community in Israel and the United States that Epstein was coordinating with. Maybe he fears it will bring the whole thing down. Maybe trying to protect them is, to a degree, trying to work with the deep state. Although I think that's a terrible strategy, maybe that was his litmus. But again, I don't think the client list, and I don't think Trump covering up his own tracks is the right talking point. They might have fake information in those files that Trump doesn't want to fight over. But they can parse that. He's got the Justice Department. He's got the FBI. He's got loyalists in both places. He should take the fight to justice. He should take the fight to the media if they've done some fakery. But the fallout, D says, he's right. And this is this morning. Epstein-Trump cover-up is trending big time this morning. He's right, and Prince Andrew got stiff, no pun intended. This cover-up stinks to high heaven. This is Elon Musk. Wow, amazing that Epstein killed himself in Ghislaine in a federal prison for a hoax. If the whole thing had no meaning, why is he dead? Why is she in jail? Why did Trump demean Prince Andrew? Why did Trump demean Jeffrey Epstein? Why did Trump demean Bill Clinton? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? And again, idiots. If Trump was on the list, it would have been leaked years ago, you idiots. First off, if he was on the list, and again, I think we're talking about contacts and associations. I think the history, and I've always said this, speaks for itself, that once Trump figured Epstein out, he distanced himself pretty quick. That's what I think. I could change my mind. But if the entire political class, blue and red, false dichotomy, if blue, red, Hollywood, the big-time financiers, if most of those classes were implicated, there's no incentive to release because it will hurt them all. So it's not about Trump. It's not about the Republicans. It's not about the Democrats. It's about something much bigger, and that's exactly why we want answers. And you shouldn't allow yourself to be gaslit into not wanting answers. The Babylon Bee says, the man who vowed to release Epstein files berates idiots for believing there are Epstein files. This is such a self-owned Joe Scarborough. Why didn't the Democrats release the Epstein files under Biden? Raskin says, we were busy. Like I said, I think everybody has incentive to not get to the bottom of this. I think maybe even Trump, you got to understand that he occupies a unique space being a populist who's actually winning elections and becoming president. And just like the first presidency, all you have to do is keep him occupied 24 hours a day. He sleeps 4 or 5 or 6 of them. And if you can limit the amount of information he gets, he's only got so much time. So he may not know everything about Epstein. There's a very real possibility that he does not fully understand Epstein's history and his linkage to the intelligence community. Trump may not know that. Or if he does know that, maybe it's so damaging he's afraid of blowing the whole thing up. Or maybe there's so much damning information in there that he's worried about a further self-own. And just like that, the Democrats no longer want the Epstein files released. This from Jolie Roginski. This is complete and utter BS. Grand jury testimony is secret. Bondi can't release it. So the battle's ongoing. Hopefully, my feeling is we might be getting closer to some semblance of the truth, but I'm going to be very wary and reserve my judgment because I still think everybody is incentivized to cover this whole thing up, and I'm going to tell you why. And for today's bit, we're going to use Wikipedia. Why? Because the left loves Wikipedia. And the fact is, Wikipedia has got most of this right. There's some details that are missing, but it's quite accurate when it comes to Epstein. So you have to understand how Epstein got his start. Teaching. At age 21, Epstein started working in September 1974 as a physics and math teacher for teens at the Dalton School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The Dalton School is an elite school. They could have had the pick of the crop of anybody in the country in terms of teaching, but they hired Epstein. And why is that weird? Because if you read this, you'll find out that Epstein dropped out of college and he didn't even have a degree to teach mathematics, let alone anything else. But the person who was headmaster at the Dalton School was one Donald Barr. On the strength of one interview with Donald Barr, Jeffrey Epstein was hired as a math professor, along with a whole slew of suspicious appointments at the Dalton School. Right around the same time, Donald Barr was writing or had written a book called Space Relations, a slightly gothic interplanetary tale. It's about the future, where there's an intergalactic human empire, and it's run by sick, twisted aristocrats. Just let's do a little bit of reading. Craig, who is now campaigning to bring Kossar into the Empire, had previously been to the planet when the passenger ship on which he was traveling on a return trip from the Betelgeuse Conference was captured by space pirates. While en route to Kossar, one of the pirates awakened Craig and the other prisoners to rape a 15-year-old virginal red-headed female captive in front of them. The rapist's fellow pirates later hear and dock his pay as punishment for spoiling her market value, her sale value. Craig then spent 2 years as a slave of the beautiful, sensual, and sadistic lady Morgan Sidney, Freudian slip. the only female member of the oligarchy with whom he became romantically involved. Together, they lived in a castle, ruling over and engaging in sexual relations with those under their dominion, including an enslaved teenager at a clinic used to breed enslaved people. This is Donald Barr, a man who was the headmaster of the Dalton School overseeing teens. While he was there, he was writing books about their sexual entrapment and slavery, and he didn't lose his job. In fact, he went on to hire one of the biggest serial pedophiles and purveyors of pedophilia to the world, Jeffrey Epstein, of the 20th and 21st century. Donald Barr had a son. His son is none other than Bill Barr. Bill Barr overseen Jeffrey Epstein's arrest and overseeing the investigation into his death. The son of Donald Barr, the man that gave Epstein, without a college degree, his first job in mathematics. Now, if you read through the Wikipedia, this is Wikipedia, folks. It's Wikipedia. You read through here, Epstein gets fired. Now, no one knows why. He was incompetent in his work, and there were allegations that he was flirting with indecently the girls at the Dalton School. So he got released. He then moves on to join Bear Stearns in 1976, even though that's his history, that's his resume, that's all he's got behind him. As a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader, he swiftly moved up to become an options trader, working in the special products division, and then advised the bank's wealthiest clients, such as Seagram president Edgar Bronfman, on tax mitigation strategies. Jimmy Kane, the bank's later chief executive officer, praised Epstein's skill with wealthy clients and complex products. In 1980, 4 years after joining Bear Stearns, Epstein became a limited partner with no history. He got a math job that he shouldn't even have had. Then he becomes a limited partner at Bear Stearns. And we know about Bear Stearns later on, the collapse, 2008, the whole thing. I mean, we could literally do hours of video just talking about all the dots being connected everywhere. 1981, Epstein was asked to leave Bear Stearns because, according to his sworn testimony, he was guilty of a Regulation D violation. So he gets kicked out of banking for breaking the law. Probably got kicked out of teaching for breaking the law. In August 1981, Epstein founded his own consulting firm, Intercontinental Assets Group, which assisted clients in recovering stolen money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers. So go to the Wikipedia article and read the whole thing. What you need to understand is that his company wouldn't take clients unless they had $1 billion plus to invest. That's not $1 billion plus in total wealth. That's $1 billion plus to invest with him. He didn't just own one island. He owned 2 islands. He had the biggest house in New York. He had properties all over the United States. He had a private jet, just like Donald Trump, called the Lolita Express. He didn't name it the Lolita Express. It was named after this novel by Vladimir Nabokov, another novel written about sexual slavery and child sex trafficking. This was the name that was colloquially given to it by his clients and his guests and by the world at large who knew this big open secret. Jeffrey became one of the most powerful people in the world. And this is why it's so weird that President Trump wants it to just go away and says there's nothing here. Everything is here. And it appears he was working on behalf, because we have testimony, if you read through all of this, which you should do, because this is just Wikipedia. You can go a lot deeper. His ties to Israel are plethora. I mean, Israeli startup in 2015, this was after his convictions. Epstein invested in the startup Reporty Homeland Security. The startup was connected with Israel's defense industry. It was headed by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who we covered in a previous video, was seen going into Epstein's palatial mansion, and 4 young girls were coming to, I mean, it's so obvious what happened. It's insane. Now, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, because the relationship between Jeff Epstein, high levels of the Israeli government, and high levels in the U.S. intelligence community and the entire U.S. political class are beyond reproach. They are established fact, even on something that the right will call a leftist publication. 80% of Americans understand this. It's an issue of global significance. By the time that Bear Stearns' fund began to fail in May 2007, Epstein had begun to negotiate a plea deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office concerning imminent charges for sex with minors. Can there be any more heinous crime? In August 2007, a month after the fund collapsed, the U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, entered into direct discussions about the plea agreement. Acosta brokered a lenient deal, according to him, because he had been ordered by higher government officials who told him that Epstein was an individual of importance to the government in the intelligence community. This is the deal that got him half the jail to himself with private security. He ran the place. He had sex with minors, and he got the red carpet rolled out for him. And then later on, we've got, in 2015, he shows up in Israel again, founding a startup called Reporty Homeland Security. The startup was connected with Israel's defense industry. It was headed, the company that Epstein invested in was headed by Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the man we've seen in a previous video showing up at Epstein's residence in the middle of an election like a honeypot, and 4 young girls showing up to have tea, I guess, is what we're supposed to believe. And we have video recordings. Epstein installed concealed cameras in numerous places on his properties to allegedly record sexual activity with underage girls, prominent people, for criminal purposes such as blackmail. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime girlfriend and companion, told a friend that Epstein's private island in the Virgin Islands was completely wired for video, and the friend believed that Maxwell and Epstein were videotaping everyone on the island as an insurance policy. This is what Trump is denying now. This is what Trump's administration is denying now, and they're calling you an idiot because you demand accountability. This has been on Wikipedia for years. This isn't new information. Another rabbit hole, if you want to go down it, is Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's wife. Or sorry. Well, maybe so. Maybe so, because we're talking about a bunch of pedos here. This is Ghislaine's father, who, knowing that Epstein, the creep, at the Dalton School was fired for making advances towards teenage students, gladly introduced his daughter to Epstein, who they then went on to be partners in crimes for many years. And Jeffrey Epstein became a billionaire doing what he did. And the Trump administration is saying, nothing to see here. It's not about the client list. It's not about Donald Trump covering up his own tracks. It's about a global intelligence operation that Epstein is the center of, and that every person who's interested in justice should want to get to the bottom of. Now, I wanted to do this today, but it's going to have to wait till tomorrow. Maybe I'll discuss it today on Clyde's live stream, because I'm going to go live with him. And if anybody else wants to make a request to have me on their show to discuss whatever they want, they can do that. Clyde's one of the only people that's ever reached out. Adam, I don't know who this guy is. It's already happened. Breaking: Netanyahu announces it's going to occupy southern Syria. Netanyahu announces the occupation of the region south of Damascus from the Golan Heights to the Druze Mountains. Now, he's doing it in Hebrew, but this is after the bombing yesterday. Now, I told you that Jelani's days are numbered, that he is a useful stopgap while Israel advances its interests in Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, all over the Middle East, with Yemen, and now might be drawing close to the time where they pull the plug on this guy too. Israel's on the march. They have incredible, immeasurable power. They can call on the United States and multiple carrier groups and the full deployment of American power in their interest to engage in a war across the Middle East. Now, you can support it or you can be against it. You can adopt both positions. What I'm trying to highlight here is the ever-changing story of the Israelis as regards the Middle East and the people there, and how they are inextricably tied to Jeffrey Epstein and this story. And while Netanyahu was in Washington, Trump all of a sudden flipped his script on Epstein, flipped his script on Ukraine. These were all very important developments, and they seem to lead back to this man. Now, you can love it or you can hate it. You can be a homer all you want for whatever team you're batting home for. But the fact of the matter is, there's no justification whatsoever for covering up the wide-scale abuse of minors and the selling of them to elites to satisfy their sexual perversions. You can pretzel logic all day. You can come up with any explanation you want. This is established fact. This is mainstream, folks. Even if the media doesn't want to cover it up, this is a mainstream understanding of who this guy was and who he was linked with. And anybody who is justifying the cover-up, anybody that's making excuses for it, have kind of outed themselves as either having zero moral compass whatsoever or being in on the game. I'm Frank Vaughn. I ain't in on the game. Consider supporting me via the website. I'll see you in the next one.